It's a pleasure to see you all here today, and also a pleasure to welcome our speaker for the day. I was reflecting on this issue of water. You know, UCCS has had workshops and sessions on local issues like homelessness. We've also looked at global and international issues like climate change. But water is really one of those issues that's both local and global at the same time. You know, if you turn on the tap and nothing comes out, there's nothing more local than that. But at the same time, water as a scarce resource is kind of the nexus for potential conflict internationally. So to bring these kinds of issues together, it's a real pleasure to introduce Ariel Dinar. He's a professor of environmental economics and policy at UC Riverside. His work addresses economic and strategic behavior related to management of natural resources, especially water. He was telling me just a moment ago that he's also moved into the field of experimental economics, which is very interesting, and he may have something to say about that. Professor Dinar's PhD was earned at Hebrew University. He then spent 15 years at the World Bank before coming to UC Riverside in 2009, where he founded the Water Science and Policy Center. He's the author of over 150 papers and has co-written or edited 24 books. In 2015, he was named as a fellow of the Agricultural and Applied Economics Association, and he will speak on scarcity as the mother of invention, water policy implications in an international setting. Professor Dinar.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So first question is, do you know where UC Riverside is? Okay, good. Just to make sure that we are on the same ground. So I'm going to talk today about a research that culminated in a book. I'm not going to talk about the book, but I'm going to talk about some facts from the book that would be of interest to you. But I will describe what we did in the book and the motivation for that book, because I think that this is a good way to address water scarcity in general. So I just need to mention that the book or the research led to the book, and the book was co-authored by Shlomi Dinar, and this is not a mistake. So this is a family enterprise, that book, and the book is published by the University of California Press. So let's start. Anyone knows what that gathering is? No, probably not. So this is a ceremony that took place 2 weeks ago between the United States and Mexico, between two delegations. On the right side is the American delegation, on the left side is the Mexico delegation, signing a treaty or signing an addendum to a treaty, to the 2013 treaty between Mexico, which is also a modification of the 1944 treaty on the Colorado and Rio Grande rivers that are shared by Mexico and the United States. So why did I want to share with you in the beginning that event? So in that 2017, October 2017 treaty, the United States pledges to invest $31.5 million in water conservation. So the first question that comes to mind is, where? So what do you think? In Utah, in Colorado, in Arizona? Excellent. So it is in Mexico. And this is something that is a new trend among international riparians to a river basin, that one country invests in the other country in order to be able to use part of the water that is saved. In 1994, I'll just make it very short, there was a great idea between Egypt and Israel that the Israelis will provide the technology will save water, the water or part of the water will go to Israel, West Bank, Gaza Strip, and Jordan, and everyone will be happy. But the analysis showed that the beneficiaries of that particular idea or the benefits will not be distributed in a certain way that Egypt didn't like. But Egypt didn't get what it was expecting to get, and actually the benefits went, the additional benefits or the higher percentage of the additional benefits went to Israel, and this just killed the deal. I guess that here everything is working. So this is why I wanted to share with you that particular slide in the beginning, because we will see how things like that happened in the different basins that I'm going to talk about. So let's talk about water scarcity. What is water scarcity? Very quick. There are several ways that water scarcity is measured. I will show you 2 or 3, and the idea is that we want to make sure that we know not only what is the water scarcity today, but what is going to happen in the future. So on the right, we can see what is called the water stress, which is an index of the amount of water supply in a certain country or in a certain region in a certain period of time, and the extractions or the withdrawals. The higher the withdrawals, the higher is the water stress. The problem with that particular measure is that it is static. You don't know what will happen tomorrow because you don't know how much will be extracted. But this is it gives us a good idea about what is going to happen. Another measure of water scarcity is the water pressure. And this is the number of people who live in a particular region of water stress, of these colors. And this can compare between points over time. And this is a little bit better. I don't like to use these, and I will move to a much simpler, more stupid measure of scarcity, but a measure that tells us much more. We can tell stories about it. So this is based on a lady, or work of a lady called Malin Falkenmark from Sweden. And after many, many years of investigation, she came up with 3 levels of water scarcity, or water stress scarcity, and between 1,000 to 1,700, now is the bomb, cubic meters per capita per year. Now, probably you have a problem with SI international units, so I will help you. And 1,235 cubic meters is 1 acre-foot. And we can compromise of 1,000 cubic meters equals 1 acre-foot. This is good enough. So when you take the amount of water available in a country and you divide it by the population in the country in a particular year, you get water per capita for that year. The big assumption in that particular index is that water remains constant. And if water, more or less, there are high and lows, depending on the year, but more or less there is a range, a very definitive range where water in a particular country is at. So when you divide a constant by an increasing number, which is the population, over time, you get a measure of scarcity that you can also see what will happen if the population will continue according to the assumptions of population growth. And for us, if we look at the red, this is California, we can see that the future of water in California, with or without good years or bad years, is that in about 10 years, California will reach what is called the scarcity level, which many other countries, so California will be in good company because many other countries are already in that. And I took only one country. This is Israel. And people live good in Israel, even with less water. And the agriculture in Israel is flourishing, and everything is fine. But this is, the takeaway that we can take from that story. By the way, there are many countries that are much higher than where, these graphs are. Like, for example, Brazil and other countries. There are some countries that are even lower. And one example is Jordan, where it is in the same neighborhood, but much lower than Israel. And we will talk about it when we'll get to the case study. So, based on that gloomy, I will prefer to answer questions at the end because I have a very limited time and I'm afraid not to stand, to meet my deadline. So, with that gloomy future, it is obvious that the popular press and unfortunately also some of the world leaders are talking about water wars. And this is basically the motivation for our study. So I will be very quick because I don't want to spend too much, but just that we see World Bank, the wars of the century will be fought over water. The Economist, very prestigious and respectful staff of future wars. Kofi Annan, United Nations Secretary General, talks about source of conflict and wars. Nobel Prize laureate for peace talks about wars. And Ban Ki-moon, another, the one who replaced Kofi Annan, talks also about potential fuel for wars. So with all of that, how can we do something good in the world? So one good spot of light is the present Secretary General of the United Nations, Antonio Guterres from Portugal, who said, no, water is a catalyst for peace, not for conflict, in one of the UN Security Council meetings. So, and then very quick, a lady, very important lady from the United Kingdom, Wendy Barnaby, was asked to write a book. She's a prolific writer. She asked to write a book on water and wars. And after doing research, she turned down the proposal or the offer from the publisher, and she published an article in the Nature magazine saying that it's still important that the popular myth of water wars somehow be dispelled once and for all, and instead of dealing with wars, policymakers and politicians should think about ways to address water scarcity. In last year, same time, I saw in the newspaper something that triggered my attention. It says, drought on Colorado River sparks revolutionary idea. sharing water. This is indeed a revolutionary idea, especially in that part of the world and among those states. And I would say also it is also sharing the benefits of the water just to allow more flexibility. So all of that background story that took longer than I expected was the motivation for our work. So we wanted to see, indeed, whether or not countries are cooperating or not over issues of water. And the way that we did it was in a book that summarized our study or studies in that we conducted for the book or before the book, before thinking about the book. And here is the theory. So we base our theory on a rich literature of different disciplines. And the first one is by John Rawls in his famous book from 1971, Theory of Justice. And he talks about when natural and other resources are abundant, schemes of cooperation become superfluous, but conversely, when conditions are particularly harsh, fruitful ventures break down. So this tells us, at least in the range of scarcity, when we can expect cooperation and when we cannot expect cooperation. And then the famous late Elinor Ostrom also talks about the same. Resource conditions must not have deteriorated to such an extent that the resource is useless. So based on these two that I present to you and many others that I don't, we came with our extension for the theory that if water resources were abundant and treaty, which is the agreement to cooperate, may be unnecessary. But when water scarcity is that high, treaty also will not help. So this is basically the theory, and the way that we graphed it is in an inverse U-shape or a hill-shaped graph that suggests a continuum between the scarcity level and the level of cooperation that we measured by the level of cooperation over treaties. And there is a very big data set of the international water treaties in the world between countries. And I'm not going to talk about that too much because I want to move to the case studies. So just to describe about the book, because it is important, motivate the message, and this is what I shared with you in the beginning, combines evidence to develop the theory, demonstrates using global international water treaty data, and this is basically statistical analysis, that there is an inverse U-shape of cooperation, and we were able to use two types of water scarcity variables. One is the water availability, which is one of the measures that I showed you in the beginning, either the map or the hyperbola. And the second one is water variability. And we know also that water variability is a measure of scarcity. The more variable the water supply is, the more scarce the resource is. Then institutions, as we will see in the case studies, they will be very important for the analysis. And then using political and economic instruments that allow different riparians who do have a conflict to collaborate with each other. And then the case studies. So I'm not going to talk about anything from here, but I'm going to talk about the case studies that demonstrates how countries sharing river basins cope with the water scarcity. And then conclusion. So what are the case studies? The case studies are the Colorado and Rio Grande, shared between the United States and Mexico, Ganges, shared between Bangladesh, India, and Nepal, Jordan, between Israel, Jordan, the Palestinian Authority, Syr Darya, between the four Central Asia republics after the collapse of the Soviet Union, and then the Tagos, shared by Spain and Portugal. So these are the maps so that we know where they are. Again, because of the time constraint, I cannot say more than that. So let's move to the case studies. And in the case studies, I will try to show what were the issues and how they were addressed. So first of all, in almost all the case studies that we have, and actually in almost every river basin in the world, we can see that trend over time. Almost every. Some of them, show an opposite trend, but in almost every international river basin in the world, we can see the trend. This is the Colorado, and this is the Ganges at Farakka at a certain point. So let's start with the Jordan. So what are the issues that the countries in that part of the world face? So first of all, droughts in the region intensify over time. Population increases over time. So this is on one hand. And then problems in or within that river basin of diversion of water in the northern part that affect the southern part. So what was the approach that was used in the peace agreement, which was the treaty between Jordan and Israel, the 1996 peace agreement that included a big chapter on water and environment? First of all, infrastructure, use of infrastructure to amend water supply. And application of institution that will obey both, that will make those two countries obey by. Issue linkage, linking water allocation to land allocation, an exchange of land for water. Sometimes this works. Second-order resources. So I call second-order resources is probably a new resource that is not a natural resource, like, for example, use of wastewater or use of desalinated water. And I will talk about that. Supply-side solutions and demand-side solutions like pricing and interbasin transfer of water between the upper part to the lower part, or letting the water flow. So this is the approach that we can see. We will talk about how also it may be relevant for California at the end. But what I wanted to add to these bullets that you can go over is that the Jordan River Basin faces now a big project that is funded also by the World Bank of moving water from the Red Sea to the Dead Sea, including also some desalination of water and supply of desalinated water to some of the urban centers in Jordan and in Israel. So this is, of course, an investment, huge investment that creates a lot of opposition by many stakeholders here, on one side of the border and on the other side of the border. But this is one possible way to address water scarcity, because there is no water in the region. They need to create water from other sources. Issues and approaches in the Farakka. Farakka is a special place where the Ganges moves from India to Bangladesh, and it was for many years that issue of water of the Ganges shared by India and Bangladesh was a hot spot. This was a big problem, leading also to wars and conflicts and disagreements. So, interbasin linkage and institutions. So one of the solutions was a hardware solution, and India started a big project that links all the rivers in India into one system. This will allow India to let more water run into Bangladesh, especially during the dry season. So they have a dry season and a wet season in that part of the world. And this is one big agreement that they did. The other important and interesting thing that happened is that the treaty was the first treaty in 1994 so 1997 between India and Bangladesh that did not allocate water on a fixed basis, on a fixed amount, because water changes over time. They did it on a percentage basis. So for the dry season and for the wet season, in intervals of 10 days, they came up with different proportions of the water based on the needs of each of the countries. So this was a breakthrough in international agreements over water that never happened before. Yeah, so this is what happened there. Now, the Syr Darya is one of the rivers that goes from Afghanistan through the, to the high mountains with the snow into the Aral Sea, which is a closed lake in Central Asia. During the Soviet Union, they diverted the water of the two rivers and sent them to irrigate in a very unsustainable way wheat and cotton because they wanted to be self-sustained. When the Soviet Union collapsed, the 5 republics, here we have only 4 that share the Syr Darya, but the Amu Darya is another river that includes also Turkmenistan. So all these 5 republics were faced with a crisis, and they didn't know how to solve it. And this is the background to the story. So there is a big conflict about the Syr Darya, on the Syr Darya, about the time of the release of the water, winter or summer. The upstream country, or countries, which is in our case Kyrgyzstan and Tajikistan, uses the water to create electricity to heat the homes and to prevent people from freezing. And they want to send the water through the turbines in the winter. But if it is sent in the winter, then the downstream countries cannot use the water for irrigation. So they came up with a great idea, and that great idea is called the Bishkek Agreement, where the upstream country will not release the water during the winter, and to compensate the country, the downstream countries that have other sources of energy are going to give an equivalent of oil and gas to Tajikistan for heating during the winter. Again, it is a very great idea, but it didn't work because Tajikistan was unable to pay back the difference and all kinds of issues. Yes, so this is the idea about using second-order resources and building in reservoirs. So one of the ideas was the downstream countries will build operational reservoirs so that they can capture the water during the winter that is released by the upstream country and then use it for irrigation. So this is one of the solutions that are being considered now. In the case of the Tagos, which is a river between Spain and Portugal, they never faced wars or high conflicts, but this is a big problem, how to allocate the water among themselves. So the only good idea that we can take away from that is the Albufera Treaty, and especially the 2008 amendment to the Albufera Treaty that suggested something very similar to what was suggested in the Ganges, to allocate the water on a basis of short intervals instead of annual or instead of seasonal, so short intervals of weeks that will allow much more flexibility in the allocation of water between the two countries, between Portugal and Spain. And then finally, the Rio Grande and Colorado, both of them, both river basins, were part of the 1944 agreement, something that is famous for the name of Harmon. The Harmon policy is named after the Attorney General at that time of the United States that claimed or argued that the United States is hegemon and should not take into account Mexico's need, and all the water that runs in the United States should be used as the United States thinks. Of course, today it does not hold for international agreements, but this was the first time that it was signed. And then 2013 was the first amendment of the treaty, and at that time, the additional interesting part that could be relevant for us is that it allowed Mexico to store water in the United States in abundant years, and then to return it. So Mexico could use some water debts, and in a cycle of 5 years, Mexico has to return the water. That never happened, no, not never, did not happen before 2013, and created a lot of political unrest between Texas farmers and the administration. So this was one of the ideas, to develop a way that Mexico can store, can store, always Kendra gives me a hard time. But I will be done. So with October 15 agreement, we can see that another aspect has taken place, and then an investment on the part of the United States in Mexico in improvement of water projects to increase the saving of water so that more water can go to the United States. So let me jump over that, what can be concluded, because I wanted, and also, I just very quickly. So this is some conclusions from the part that I did not show you, but I think that it is important that, or I didn't talk about, the statistical part, but I think it is important that I do share some of the results. So first of all, power. When we share water, we have more powerful, less powerful. Not always it is the upstream and the downstream. Sometimes it's the opposite. We could not find that the power, either economic power or military power or political power, facilitates the allocation. So this was a surprise for us. and we had many, many observations. Incentives. So, use of financial incentives to the parties provides the means for fostering cooperation. And now I'm talking in terms of international cooperation. It is not only water that is important. Trade and economic cooperation and diplomatic relations can help to improve the attitude of the countries or the regions for cooperation. And then, of course, like everyone knows, in the middle of the night when somebody will wake us up, working institutions are probably the key, and it is also here in the case of international water. And finally, the geography. We had rivers that are upstream, downstream, and we have rivers that are, share the river on the border. Our first hypothesis was that upstream, downstream will be much more significant in terms of the tension, but we couldn't find. This was our second surprise. Okay, lessons for California, and I'm going to steal some time. First lesson. So first of all, California is a microcosmos. We can see conflicts between regions, Northern California, Southern California. We can see conflicts between sectors, agriculture and environment, agriculture and urban. So, if we can imagine the context of international conflicts and in the context of California, then our life, we can gain some knowledge. So, therefore, I think it is relevant that we take some lessons from the international case to California. So one, and again, I extended a little bit, I stretched a little bit the lessons just to make them relevant for California. So you will see that. So first of all, develop a system that will allow conjunctive use of all water. Surface water, groundwater, and lately, which I see happening, is wastewater. Wastewater in California several years ago was taboo. I mean, when you talk to farmers, they said, yuck, no way. Today, in some regions, they fight, especially in Southern California, they fight over the right to have wastewater. So this is one lesson. Second, reduce the transaction cost of moving water. And again, California has a functioning water market or water trade system, but in some regions there are impediments that have been put in place by the counties that prevent an efficient water market to take place. This could be one way of improving water allocation. Now, this is, I think, something that I will need to defend a little bit better, but we have in California a kind of a water rights system. I mean, many people criticize it. My suggestion is to not only have water rights for the physical amount of water, but also to extend it to include also storage rights in aquifers or existing or future reservoirs, so that people who have water rights can have better flexibility in storing it between abundant year and dry year. Even in California, agriculture is the highest or the larger consumer of fresh water. So any improvement in the agricultural sector will have an effect on the entire state in terms of water conservation. Now, desalination. Desalination is not an ugly word. We already have in California about 7, actually 8, including San Diego, treatment facilities. In many parts of the world, this is the trend now, because if there is no water, even if you will save, you will not be able to produce water. And then promote frequent regional dialogue among conflicting groups. This, I think, should be part of the culture of dialogue and discussions among people that face water scarcity. And introduce more. I mean, the state has, these projects, these different projects that the state provides money for good ideas for investment in different projects. So this should be encouraged even more to allow regional solutions for water scarcity. With that, I am done.